I'd been practicing a lot, and I was like, I sort of looked at my guitar teacher and went, that'd be a kind of a cool job. He doesn't start work till 3 o'clock. I go 7 in the morning, and then I can just teach guitar. That'd be awesome. I should do that. And so, um, I talked to him. I said, what do I have to do to become a guitar teacher? And he's like, don't do that. And anyway, I was persistent, and he goes, oh, you should go to the con. And I went, well, okay, well, how do I go to the con?
Yeah.
And he goes, okay. So I had some theory lessons, which was sort of stuff I sort of knew anyway, and I did whatever exams, I did whatever A&B exams were the requirement to get into the con, I did them. I had some theory and lessons and, oral training and stuff, which I'd never actually done formally. I'd never done it at school, and so that was kind of interesting. It was things that I pretty much already knew, but I just sort of never really formalised them. And then, I went to the con, and in those days it was just a diploma, I was there 3 years. And in that time, I got some really good classical training from Julian Byzantine.
Yeah.
And I knew I wasn't going to be a classical guitar player. I think if you've got sort of ambitions to be a classical guitar player, you should be doing concerts by the time you're 14 and, like touring the world. And serious classical musicians know they're going to be serious classical musicians from the time they're tiny, So I knew that wasn't me, and I didn't. To be honest, I actually didn't really like the classical guitar repertoire that much. All that Spanish music, I don't have the.
This wasn't your thing.
I don't have that temperament for Spanish music. Like, I'm sure Spain's a nice country and the food's great and whatever, but that sort of fiery. It just wasn't me. I was like, I don't want to do that,
It's that surfer,
And,
the surfer in you.
maybe. But the last year I was at the con, I did because it was the 20th century back then. I did a all 20th century program
Right.
with some really interesting composers. There's a lot of great English classical guitar composers actually, 20th century, that all wrote for Julian Bream, because Julian Bream's a great English classical guitarist of the sort of 70s, 80s. Probably earlier. I saw him a couple of times. He's awesome. And so he got a lot of those really great, like Benjamin Britten, William Walton, lots. Someone I'm missing. There's others I'm missing. But it's quite a lot. It's quite a big group of British composers who wrote great music at the end of the 20th century.
Right.
So I got into that and I played that a lot. And in the meantime, I always listened to jazz. I listened to all sorts of music. I liked jazz, but I didn't really hear any guitar. I didn't really hear any jazz guitar that really fired me up. Like I heard a few jazz guitarists. Don't want to mention their names or anything, and I was kind of like, yeah, they're fine, but it doesn't really excite me. Not in the same way, like if you listen to, I had like Kind of Blue or whatever, and Coltrane and Cannonball, and I was just like, whoa. And then I heard jazz guitar, and it was sort of daggy and plinky and. And then I finally heard, when I heard Wes Montgomery, It All Changes, I went, oh, okay, right. That's something I can get behind. That's actually cool, And so then I dived a bit deeper into that. And then when I finished at the con, I wasn't because in those days, you didn't stay in Brisbane at all. In those days, Brisbane wasn't an option, So I was just, going to move to Melbourne and Sydney, Melbourne or Sydney, and probably I was thinking I was probably going to do a jazz degree or whatever, or jazz, do some more study or whatever.
Yeah.
I wasn't ready to go overseas yet. And so there's Ike Issacs was in Sydney, and he was a really great guitar player. Spent most of his time in England, actually. And I had some lessons with him in Sydney and just loved it. And we got on really well. And because I had the classical thing, I used to do these fancy arrangements of songs. And that's a lot of where learning about jazz for me came from, was arranging for guitar. And so I'd arrange all these sort of things with all these bits. um, I'd do all these fancy things and save them up and go and play them for Ike, and
Yeah.
that was sort of a big deal for me. And I thought I was going to move to Sydney. I really thought Sydney was, because Ike was there,
Yeah.
and Sydney was a bit more like up north, and there were beaches, and I thought, oh yeah.
Mm.
But then and I spent a bit of time in Melbourne. I'd had some lessons with a few people, and I was sort of not really into it. And then I think it was just as I was about to leave Melbourne to go back to back to Brisbane again. I had a lesson with Doug de Vries,
Ah.
and it was just so great. And it was one of those really refreshing moments where, for me, there just seemed to be heaps of I don't know what the right word is, apart from bullshit. There seemed to be
BS.
yeah, there was all this mystique surrounding jazz and surrounding jazz guitar, and you have to
Interesting.
do this and you have to do this, and there was all these old blokes that were sort of these gatekeepers that were like, oh, well, if you want to succeed in this town, you've got to be this and you've got to be that, and it sort
Yeah.
of seemed so sort of cut and dried, and it was old fashioned,
Mm.
um, in a sort of a boys club sort of way. It was very, you got to be in the show bands and you've got to do this, so there was very little room for any. There didn't seem to be any creativity whatsoever.
Mm.
Whereas when I had a lesson with Doug, he was fantastic. He was like, no, those old farts, don't worry about them. And then he
Yeah.
said, oh, Carl, I'm doing this gig. And I went to this gig that was they used to do these gigs at the old St Kilda Bowling Club, which they
Ah.
don't do anymore.
Okay.
And it was Doug's band, young Philip Rex on bass,
Nice.
Nico and Jax, just all these crazy dudes just playing this incredible music. I went, it's
Yes,
fantastic. I'd
these are
never
my
really,
people.
the whole jazz guitar thing had been so stuffy up until then. And and then I was hooked. I was like, yeah, this is it. I'm coming here.
Mm.
I want some of that. Because the room was full, everyone was loving it.
Yeah.
Doug, at that time it was, Vince Jones was really popular, and Doug was in Vinny's band, and
Yeah.
they were on TV, like that Steve Vizard show and stuff. It was very, they were, I remember the first time I played with those sort of players, I was really nervous, like Ian Chaplin had been on TV,
Yeah.
and Philip Rex, and like all these people that,
Yeah.
now you don't really think of it. I remember at the time they were like celebrities.
Mm.
And so yeah, I ended up moving to Melbourne, and again, it was a really different time. There were heaps of gigs and
Yeah.
not many players. And so
Mm.
when I moved to Melbourne, I caught up with Doug, and I was like, well, should I go to the VCA and do a jazz course? And he's like, don't do that. It's bullshit. and he kind of, I had a lesson. He goes, come to my gig on Saturday and sit in.
Yeah.
I'll introduce you to people.
Yeah.
And I think a couple of days later, a singer gave me a call and said, oh, I got your name from Doug de Vries. I've got this duo gig,
Mm.
and he can't do it. He started palming gigs off to me.
Ah.
And I just started doing gigs, and that's how I didn't go and do any courses. I didn't do anything. I
Yeah.
didn't really know that much about jazz in those days, but I could do a gig and I could play
Mm.
sort of convincing guitar, especially in a duo thing. And so I did heaps and heaps and heaps of that stuff. I did heaps of duos and
Mm.
heaps of small group things, and that's how I got to know the other sort of Melbourne musicians.
Mm.
All that time, I wanted to play in a group. I wanted to play my own originals in a group. That's what I wanted to do. It's like I can't wait till I stop playing these horrible duo things.
Yes.
Do proper gigs, proper music.
That's
Um,
brilliant.
and it really took me such a long time to realise that no, this is actually something that suits you, and you're good at it, and you
you're
enjoy
really
it,
good at it.
and that this is probably your thing. And I've fought it for so many years. And even now, I don't really do that many duos.
Mhm.
I mean, I'm not doing anything at the moment,
Mm.
but in my sort of general musical life, I do way more small group things than straight out duos. I mean, I'm doing the duo with Ben Hanlon, the bass player. Um, Chris, Kristin and I still get to play together a little bit. I played with her over Christmas a couple of times. That was nice. But yeah, there's not a lot. I'm not doing a lot. I'm not really doing a lot. It still is like, for me, it's like the backbone of what you should be able to do as a guitar player anyway.
Yeah.
Is just be able to play by yourself, play with one other person, and take care of business, and be able to play the chords if you need to, the melody if you need to, the solo if you need to. Just do whatever part of the tune needs doing. Just do it. You don't have to have this. You don't have to have that. You don't have to have a play along. You don't have to have someone on drums. You don't have to. You just whatever you need to do, because you do some pretty weird gigs when you're first playing. You might do a gig with no bass but drums and piano or something, and you go, what the hell am I supposed to do with this? And you kind of work out something, and you come up with something, and then like that flexibility is it's the most important thing, to be able to all of a sudden to realize what the music needs at any particular time, and be able to do it. It's like the music tells you what you need to be able to do, and if you can't do it, it's going to sound stupid. If you think you're going to impose some fancy stuff over the top of whatever's happening in the music and it doesn't fit, it's going to sound stupid. So just that flexibility and ability to sit back and go, well, what needs to be done? Okay, no one's doing this, I'm going to do that.
Yeah, exactly. And there's a lot of listening too, isn't there?
It's pretty much all that it is. It's pretty much the only thing that it is. I mean, it's easy to say because you've got to have enough stuff under your belt to be able to respond in any way. Like you can listen and go, oh, I love what's going on. I'm gonna fit in with what's going on by doing this, And so you've got to have a bunch of stuff that you can do to fit in. But it's all about listening, That's pretty much it.
I want to go into a little bit like more detail when you do talk about this duo setting, because you're sort of saying that you have to be able to learn to play by yourself. Now, there's a lot of people that probably don't know about guitar in terms of what your capabilities are compared to, say, a piano versus another instrument. I just wondered if you could talk a little bit about, like, say, playing by yourself versus playing with someone else. What are the main things you're thinking about but also doing on your instrument?
Yeah, I mean, guitar's one of those instruments that unless you play the guitar or played a bit of guitar, it's very hard to know what the hell it does.
I agree.
You know that these sounds coming out of it.
Yeah.
You know that it can do certain things, but it doesn't do everything. I find over the years I've played in lots of sort of large ensembles with great arrangers who can arrange all this incredible music, and sometimes they come to the guitar part and they just go, I don't know what to do with you. If I just give you the piano part, can you work something out? And I even had that with like I just got called up to do a studio session with an orchestra, and they were going, it's for a TV show or whatever. I'd done one for them previously, and it was just strumming acoustic guitar, and it was really easy. So I just thought I'll be that again,
Yeah.
But it was this composer, and she'd written this full thing, and she's going, oh, this scene, it's like a love scene, and the couple are in a waterfall, and it's really beautiful, and I've written this melody, and these are the chords, and I kind of want you to put the two together. Is that possible? And like this is like a professional, high level, film and classical composer, like serious composer, who's just written this for orchestra, and so there I am in front of the orchestra going, yeah, okay, I can give that a go. But it's sort of what I do anyway, and so I put the melody and chords together and made a little arrangement and did it. And so people don't really know what the difficulties and what the strengths of that sort of guitar playing are, because they can hear that the guitar can do chords and melody together, but but in this sort of really weird mush together sort of way. Because you don't have, like piano, you have two you have two hands. You have a hand, this hand plays the melody, da, 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 and this hand plays the accompaniment. Da, 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 and so you can have these very full, things going on. Whereas guitar, you've got to kind of mush it all together on the fretboard and strings, So, and there's certain chords that are easy on piano because they're all just notes in a row, but they're like massive stretches on guitar. And
true.
it's really it's a really bizarre instrument. It's a good instrument to just play a few chords and it's easy. But when you want to try and learn the system of music on the guitar, it's peculiar. It really is. It's got a lot of problems.
Yeah.
The tuning's a problem. It's problematic.
Yeah.
And so so there's a lot of stuff about if I'm accompanying myself on guitar and I'm playing a melody and I'm trying to play, I sort of think of it like I'm playing like I'm imagining I'm playing for my auntie. Like say my auntie's favorite song is something.
Beautiful Love.
Is How Deep Is the Ocean? Or I've got to be able to play the melody in a recognizable way that it's that song. And so the melody's kind of rules the arrangement. The melody's got to be really strong, and then any sort of chords I can fit around the melody. I've just got to try and fit in what I can. Like it's not a thing where I've got lots of choice. Where on piano you can go, well, I can do these substitutions, and I can do this, and I can do this, I can do this. Yeah. Guitar, you go, I'm just going to do what I can, Yeah. And so that's sort of, for me, it's like the auntie test. Like I don't really know a song unless I feel like I could sit down and it's my auntie's favorite song and I can just play it to her and she'll go, yeah, that's great.
I like that. That's great. But I guess going back to the melody though, isn't it? Like it's really about that melody and being able to play that melody, but be able to comp and add, as you say, chords to make it sound good, even though the reality is you've only got 4 fingers that you can really only use. Well,
by the time you're playing the melody, that's at least one finger. So you've really only got 3 left. And so, and then, so you can play sort of little sneaky things where you squish your finger across a couple of strings or whatever. But it's usually not that big full chord thing that you want anyway. You want to just kind of have these little, it's a little bit sort of smoke and mirrors. You kind of got to have enough information there to fool people into thinking there's something else going on, And so, and that's the same with rhythm. Like you can't always play a constant bass line or you can't always play these constant things. But if you play them every now and then, it's like, oh no, it's okay. It's all sorted. Like, no, it's fine. And then people think, hang on, what's going on now? And then you play the bass line again. Oh no, it's okay. So you got to kind of swap between. There's not really you don't have that. And I was, again, going back to the classical guitar thing, that's what happens in classical guitar too. Sometimes you have these big grandiose sort of intros and like you feel like the style of the intro keeps going throughout the whole tune, but it doesn't. It sort of backs away and then the melody comes in and everyone's listening to the melody and the accompaniment is only just a couple of notes. So I think there's a lot of stuff you can learn from, there's a lot of stuff jazz guitarists can learn from classical guitar repertoire, just about arranging, just about the way music works on the guitar, because I think, as a jazz guitarist, you're listening to a lot of other instruments all the time. You're listening to a lot of saxophone players, you listen to a lot of piano players. That I think your guitar, I know mine did for a long time. My sort of guitar knowledge suffered, so because I'd been so into the guitar for a long time, and then when you get into jazz, sort of there's not many guitar players that people are interested in. People talk about Coltrane and Monk and Ellington and all these instrumentalists, and none of them are guitar players, and none of them had guitar players in their bands, So you go through a big period of listening to no guitar whatsoever, and you kind of get used to that. You get used to, and so then what you do on guitar is you kind of do a guitar version of what you're hearing on the piano or the saxophone or whatever. But I think it's good for guitarists to revisit good guitar every now and then, quite often. And Brazilian music's different. Brazilian music is so strongly guitar-y, it's guitar's the focus, and so getting a good dose of Brazilian music is a good thing.
good thing. That's awesome.
Mm.
So I'd love to know sort of in terms of then going from that sort of space of being more of a soloist / in a duo, you're still having to do a lot of the work yourself. I would like to know a little bit about, like, once it moves into trio, quartet, what are
Mm.
then the next things that you're thinking about? Because you're saying, what I'm hearing is that you're doing a lot of listening and you're almost thinking about, where do I need to fit in here? Because as a guitar, it's not the same as being the bass player. Like, the bass player has a certain
Yeah.
role. How do the roles
Yeah.
change? I'd like to,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, yeah, the sort of the more people in the group, um, the less sort of explicit responsibility you have. I mean, you still have all the responsibility. Like, you can't lean on the others in the band to, you've got to you've got to have a good time and good harmony and good form and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So I think being able to play by yourself is the basis for playing in a group.
Yeah.
Except you just don't have to explicitly play so many bass notes because there's a bass player,
Okay.
or you can play more. You can play rhythms that are playing against the main rhythm. You can play more against the rhythm with the drummer than you can when you're playing just by yourself.
Okay.
Because if you play against the rhythm when you're playing by yourself, it just sounds odd. It sounds like you're fiddling around. But I still think all the core principles are all there when you're playing in a group. The thing I find is I very rarely play with another chordal instrument. So it's not very often that I play with piano in the band. Most of the time it's I'm the chordal instrument. So generally my role, as far as from solo all the way up to quartet or whatever, is pretty much the same. I'm sort of comping for people and filling out the sound, and but then when I do play with piano, depending on who it is playing piano, like some piano players just steamroll the whole thing, and it's like, I think piano players are really used to being like the musical director, and so they just sort of play all the time, and like, and they got like all this, So sometimes when I play with piano, I just stand there all night. I go, well, I can't hear how I could contribute to what's going on at the moment, so I'll just wait until there's something I can contribute.
Yeah.
But every now and then you get a piano player who's sort of a bit more of a listener, and Steve Newcomb was great to play with. I love playing with Stevie because he was so open, and he'd be wanting to have a conversation.
Yeah.
And there are other piano players who I really enjoy playing with and who I learn a lot playing with. I like playing with piano players because I learn a lot.
Right.
Just about that chordal role, because they're so much better at it. They've got so much more language they can call on. So I always learn a lot, but it's sometimes I feel like I'm sort of playing the gig of a sort of a one-hand type on my back or something. You're only sort of playing half the guitar, or so have a little fiddle every now and then. But most of what I do is I'm the chordal instrument. So the only thing that really changes from solo to quartet is not actually physically playing the bass notes. And I don't continuously play the bass notes when I'm playing solo anyway. I sort of assume that what I'm doing is helpful enough for people not to hear every single bass note on every single beginning of every bar. Hopefully.
Yeah.
I mean, when it comes to sort of solo guitar, sometimes for some people there's just not enough going on. Like, if you're used to listening to Rachmaninoff piano solos or whatever, there's just not going to be enough going on. They're going to like.
Totally. You're just like, I want more. I just want more notes or something.
Yeah.
When you go back to talking about how when you had a teacher and you played with that person, I think for me as a vocalist, the best sort of education I ever had was playing with yourself and other people, because that's really the best lesson,
Absolutely. Because if you're aware, that teaches you what you need. And I mean, because really when you're studying, you're sort of wrapped up in this thing, and then you stop studying and you have to become your own teacher. And I think that people that go on to just keep improving, the slow and steady thing,
Yeah.
and work out a way to become their own teachers, they're the ones that end up being successful. You know, there's a lot of people who are really good at uni and really flashy, and they finish and then they go, well, what do I do now? You know, who's going to tell me what to do now? And fall in a heap. Whereas if you kind of worked away this methodical thing and you're constantly listening to yourself, and because I used to just record everything that I did back in the old days, I had this Walkman that had a record function, you know, the cassette with the, and so I just used to put it on the music stand, just record every single thing that I did, and listen to it in the car on the way home, and because you'd just done the gig, you could remember everything about it, and you could remember how it sort of felt. And you thought, oh, I thought I did really well in that tune, and it sounds like crap, you know, or vice versa. I thought I really blew that, and it's not so bad. And it really gets you used to listening to yourself, which is important because, you know, like when people listen to them, go, oh, I can't stand listening to myself. Oh, I hate that. And you go, well,
who else wants to do it? You know, like
no one else cares. You know, like no one cares. You're the only person who cares. Like you can pay teachers to care, and we care for an hour and give you, you know, as much as we want. And, you know, like, it's not that no one sort of, but yeah, no one really minds. No one cares. No one wants you to be it. No one, everyone's supportive and everything, but no one really. And people just tell you it sounds great, and no one will give you any sort of criticism. So it's sort of, it's up to you to really sort through that stuff and go, is this what I intended it to be? And do I think this is a successful version of what I was attempting? And is this how I want to present myself? And so once you get over the whole, oh, I hate listening to myself thing, it just becomes the most valuable learning tool, because it's just, yeah, I mean, you're the only one who knows what you want to sound like. I can give people advice. I can say, wow, you know, that's cool, but maybe try this or do this, or, and it doesn't really, you know, like it's good, it's nice, but only you know what you want, you know.
Totally. And then that almost moves into that unique voice of like being you and authentic, right? Like, you know, you can try to take everyone's point of view and go, oh, but James said this, so I'm going to do that. And it's like, the reality is like, isn't that the most, you know, the commodity or the thing that people want is the authenticity and the uniqueness in the sound. And I have to say, like, when I hear you play, it's not just the guitar you're playing, it's the way you play that I know is you.
I think being in Australia, there's a lot of, I don't feel it anymore, but I know when I was younger, there was a lot of sort of, oh, you've got to be Australian, you've got to sound Australian sort of thing. And try and you know, people would bag a lot of American music and bag a lot of this and say, oh, that's, you know, a bunch of, you know, don't worry, don't copy that, don't listen to that, don't do that. And so you end up actually ignoring too much and just sort of going and following your own. I found that once I started to listen to a bunch of stuff that I thought I knew, and I'm like, nah, I don't know this at all. I need to do some homework. I actually stopped writing my own music for a long time just because I just wanted to learn, just because I got sick of it. Every time I'd write my own music, I'd be like, this again? Really? You know, I just had this sort of, and so I ended up learning a lot of music and and concentrating on certain things that I thought were deficient in my own music, and learning a bunch of stuff and learning a bunch of repertoire of things that I thought I knew, but I didn't know. As when you're young, you just skim over stuff, you know, especially if it's a bit simple or a bit, you know, like you're young and you go, oh, Charlie Parker, yeah, it's just arpeggios and yeah, it's just bebop, yeah, and you know, where's the Wayne Shorter? I want to get into Wayne Shorter. Oh yeah, you know, we're always looking for this more complicated thing so you can be complex and sophisticated. And when you don't really spend enough time on any one thing to be comfortable enough with all those things to sound like yourself. You know, you can play a few things that sound like it and think that you've got it covered, but yeah, you've got to immerse yourself in all sorts of things in order to play like yourself. You've got to have a broad
I love
Yeah,
that.
but I don't
Yeah,
know.
good point.
I mean, I don't particularly worry about. I mean, I remember the first time I did a recording.
Mm.
I just I was like, yeah, I want to sound like Wes Montgomery and Ahmad Jamal joined together. That's all. That's all I want. And then
That was in your mind.
that's what I wanted,
Yeah.
and it came out as it came out, and I'm like, it doesn't sound anything like that. And but that's fine. You know, like you know what
That's
I
you, right? Like,
mean.
yeah.
um, and I remember reading an interview with Bill Frisell. You know, like who's such an individual voice, and he goes, oh, every night I just go to a gig and I just try and play like my heroes and fail. And I'm like, awesome. You know, that's what I do too.
But then does that make you feel like a failure? That's my question. Because, like,
Not at all.
oh,
No, not at
good,
all.
good. That's
I think
brilliant.
if you came away from a gig and went, nailed it, I think that'd be a problem.
Yeah.
I don't come away from gigs like depressed and wanting to quit,
Mm,
but I don't come away from things going smashed,
yeah.
you know. So I think that'd be problematic.
It's almost impossible, I think. Um, I think from my personal experience, there's no way it's ever going to be good enough. But I don't see that as a bad thing. I
No,
always
but
think
it's
there's
music.
something to strive for, right? Like music is always so, you know, so imperfect.
Yeah,
You know, like it's imperfectly perfect. It should be anyway. But as someone that is a part of that, you know, process and being a musician, it's kind of like, well, that was the moment. And but at the same time, there's always something to strive for. And for me personally, that's what makes me so driven, I guess, is just always.
yeah, yeah, me too. Yeah.
And I wonder, do you think that is a part of most musicians' kind of way? Like, do you think that gets in
Yeah,
people's way too, though?
yeah, I'd hope so, and I think
Mm,
it's especially more relevant now. I don't think there's any because there's no musicians that are doing it for any other reason. Like there's no other reason to do it anymore. You know,
mm,
um, perhaps there was a time when you could be quite a successful musician, a studio musician or orchestral musician or whatever, um, and you could do it as a job, but it doesn't really exist anymore. And so everyone pretty much does it because they have to and because they love it, and
mm,
um, there's no other reason to do it. There's
yeah.
just there's no other reason to do it. We're all suckers.
It just suck as a punishment. But I don't know, there's something about it. There has to be though. Like, why the hell are we still doing it? Like,
Yeah, why
like,
the hell are we still doing it? Yeah, exactly.
yeah,
Yeah. I mean, really, like, I listen to Bach and go, well, you know, this is quite a few hundred years old and it's perfect. What am I doing? You know, like, and that's true. What the hell am I doing? You know?
yeah. But this is the thing though. This is all about like different people's points of view, and it's like you see that as perfect, but what if someone else saw that what you do is what they think is the most perfect thing? In
No one.
but I'm just trying to flip the coin. But like this is the thing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You know, like, it's awesome.
Mm,
Yeah, and it's that huge that um, you know, or I'm getting on. You know,
mm,
I've been doing it all my life. Or, I've been playing music all my life, and I still having these breakthroughs. You know, like I still go, oh, that sounds better than what it sounded like last year, and that's what keeps you going. You know, certain things don't sound better than last year.
mm.
Probably because I was working on this particular thing last year. Sometimes I listen to old recordings of myself and go, "Oh, that sounds awesome! I don't do that anymore. I should do that again."
Yeah.
Um, but it all sort of stays in there somehow
Mm,
and sort of collects up and just becomes your experience. And so all those things, like we were talking about before, that when when there's a certain thing happening in the music, you go, "Oh yeah, I know what's going on. I know a good thing that will work with this." And you have a memory of things that have been successful in the past,
mm.
and away you go.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. So I want
yeah,
to change tact a little bit. So sort of moving into that like duo setting. What are you thinking about? Like, because I'm interested because I'm a vocalist myself, and I
yep,
just wondered a little bit about what is something you need from the singer, and what are the main things you're needing with, like, when you're playing with a singer? What is it you personally like to have, and what are the challenges when that doesn't happen when you're working with a vocalist?
One thing I find, especially with sort of with jazz, is people tend to have their favorite singers or their favorite arrangements, and that's the way they sing the song.
Yeah.
And they sing it the same every time, or have a similar. And you don't need that much. You only need a couple of different versions, and perhaps a more original, show tune version of it, and come up with your sort of own take on it. So I find that important, because I know a lot of those albums that people like, the Julie London albums and the Diana Krall albums and all that stuff, and when, or Ella, or when someone's only just heard the Ella version of "You'd Be So Nice to Come Home To," or you know that's, and so the thing that I really like with singers, especially, is a sort of a flexibility and being listened to, in that sort of duo way, and not just going, I'm playing the Barney Kessel part for that Julie London song, and that's fine if that's my job. That's my job, and that's fine. It's music that I like, and I'll do it. But the best experiences are if someone has internalized the song and knows a few different ways through the song, and is open to listening to me and a bit of back and forth, and that's the best thing. Yeah. And all this stuff is on top of being in time and in tune.
Yeah.
And from my point of view, all this fancy talk is all about the same thing: being in time and not playing 3/8, and making sure your form's right, making sure like you don't cross the beat. There's a basic entry level of technical, box ticking before you can think about creativity. And I generally, students, and I was probably in the same boat, tend to go for the complicated things way before they've solidified the basics. And so I find whenever my students talk about this aspect, and some of them are interested in it, but not very many guitar players are interested in this. They all want to be out the front of their original quartets, shredding away, because that's what they think. That's what they think people like. Occasionally you get some sort of realistic one, and that notices the fact that most of what I do is play with singers and accompany, and they go, wow, should I do that? And I go, well, I don't know. If you want to have a crack at making a living as a guitar player, then yes. Yeah. That's 90% of what you're going to do. It's really nice to play your own originals in front of a quartet or whatever, but it's very rare. That's a very rare thing, and so a lot of students, they don't see that as being an important thing, and they don't realise how hard. And then they do it, and they go, "Oh, it's too hard." This sounds terrible, and I go, "Well, it's really hard. That's why it sounds terrible. It's because you need to do a lot of it, and you need to not hate it, and you need to not think of it as a chore, and you need to not think of it as something that you're going to do for a while until you get your originals quartet together. It really is a core skill with guitar playing. And the thing about it is, all the guitar players they love, Kurt Rosenwinkel and whoever, they could do it. Kurt Rosenwinkel would be awesome at playing a duo.
Yeah.
But they just hear him shredding in a band, and they go, "Yeah, I want to do that." They don't realise that to do that, you need all this other foundation.
Because you would say you battled that, didn't you? Like you said before a little bit, was like, I wanted that quartet thing, but also I'm really good at this duo stuff. And it's a really, really important skill, and it's hard. It takes years.
Yeah, it does. It takes a long time. Yeah. And even in the early days of when Kristin and I were doing that duo, we played together a lot, and we did lots of duo gigs, and we were like, we were fully organised to do the quartet thing. We go, who are we going to get on? When we do our big recording, we're going to get Simon Barker and we can get Brett Hurst, and we're going to it's gonna be awesome, you know.
Yeah.
And I think when we were doing these duos at the at the Pig and Whistle in Brisbane, and there was this guy. There, this German guy, who was Kristin knew him. He was a friend who was videoing us, and he said, "Oh, I could get you some gigs in Europe," and we're like, "Oh yeah, but we're going to do it with the band." And he goes, "No, just a duo. You guys sound great." And we're like, "Really? Is this what we're doing?" And then we kind of went, "Hmm." And then we thought, well, should we do a recording and see what it sounds like? You know, we ended up doing the first album, and you know, I remember listening to the first album, going, "Is this enough? Is this what we do? Is this it? You know, is this? You're really good with bass and drums." And plus, the music we'd sort of written was sort of tending towards sounding like it needed basses and drums. So Kristin had written all these parts and everything, and so I was trying to play all this. And of course, it didn't sound that good because we had in our minds, we had this quartet, we had drum solos and we had big guitar solos, and you know, we had all this stuff. And so the duo to us sounded. But then I guess it just you know, and I never really considered, you know, I didn't play walking bass lines. I didn't sound like Martin Taylor or you know, like Tuck Andress or those sort of really specialist sort of solo duo players. And but then it was just like, oh no, actually this is it. This is our version of guitar and voice just playing together, you know.
Yeah.
And it was good. It was good. And you have to be really. It took a long time to be really comfortable with space and silence. And
Exactly. Yeah.
you know, I've listened to a couple of things from the early days of that duo, and I just constantly trying to fill up the sound with notes and play all the time, and Kristin singing all the time, and I think after a while, and then we did quite a lot of gigs. We did a lot of gigs together, and we did a lot of gigs in sort of nice quiet rooms and sort of concert type situations, and you just get used to not having to feel the sound all the time. Just going, well, you know, silence is great, you know.
Yeah.
But
And it implies so much. That's the thing. Like people hear things, you know.
Yeah.
We don't have to always fill up the space. Yeah.
I know, but that takes a really long time to learn.
Yeah.
And it's so uncomfortable. Like it just feels like when there's nothing happening, you know, on those stages, you just feel like you're failing. You feel like you're just
and then everyone's just sitting there, and you're just like in your head.
Thinking, oh, that's nice. I've got a little bit of a break to process what's just happened, and I'm sure something else is going to happen soon. Fine. I'm happy seeing you. In my brain, oh, they're going to think I don't know what to do over this chord, and they're going to think I've forgotten it, or they're going to think I've skipped the four. You know,
Yeah.
Too hard.
Yeah. I just think it's such a beautiful thing, isn't it? Like as you grow playing in this kind of setting, and just feeling, it's almost for me, like as I'm getting older, just acceptance of just stuff and letting things go. I'm better at it. So therefore I'm allowing, you know, with the certain music I'm playing, or I'm just allowing things to be a little bit more like, okay, let that one go.
Yeah. I mean, being a jazz musician gives you certain skill. It gives you a good skill base to do a lot of different types of musical situations. Like I find jazz musicians generally can play in time and can, you know, we can take care of ourselves in various situations. So it's not the end of the world that we can't improvise, but it really is the reason why I do it. You know, like it is the thing that keeps you going, is the fact that it's slightly different every time. Yeah. Even when you're playing in quite a steady group that might play the same material, the fact that it's slightly different all the time, it's great. You know?
It's like the spice of life, I think.
Totally.
I really feel like that. It's like the unknown for me is my personality is like, I like that challenge or being uncomfortable a little bit, you know, and I still have certain fears and whatever, but like I'll always, for me, growth and just improvisation in its essence of just that being different, always, you know, it's never the same. I think that's probably what gets me up every day to want to do it.
Yeah, totally. And that's definitely the thing that gets you practicing, because you might have done something the night before or done something at a gig and you go, I just didn't know what to do. I couldn't cope in that situation. So this You need to sort it out. And so you practice it. Humiliation is the best.
Humiliation is the best way to learn. We should like finish up on that, like,
You're not allowed to do that. You're not allowed to tell your students that.
No, I'm joking. Of course not. Just promote that. Like, that's how we learn. But to be honest, like, I've done some things on gigs, like, and in some pretty high profile situations where I like, never gonna do that again.
Yeah, me too.
You know?
Yeah. And I'm older, so I came through in a time where older musicians used to tell off younger musicians. It doesn't
Really?
happen too much anymore. I got told off like mad when I was young, like even by musicians who aren't even that much older than me, but they were more experienced. I
Huh.
just,
Would they just
yeah,
did they just literally to your face after the gig or on the gig or?
on the gig, after the gig, before the gig, whenever. Yeah,
And so that,
especially it's uncool. Like it's uncool, but it was quite normal
mm,
for a saxophone player to be playing out the front of the band, and if someone in the band did something wrong, for them just to turn around and just give it to them. Like that happened to me. Like saxophone player just stopped playing their solo, turn around to me, get with the program. Me completely bright red, super embarrassed, and like going, well, I won't do that again.
wow.
And, and you hear stories about that. Yeah, I love reading those old interviews. I went through a period of over Christmas when I was on holiday of reading a bunch of stuff because I find that especially in Australia, jazz can be very can be very white, middle class. Like
Yeah.
all the kids come through private schools. They schools with a good music education, a good music program, and it can all be very up in your head and esoteric. And I wanted, and so I read. I always go back and read Miles's autobiography just because it's so out. But I read Art Pepper's autobiography,
Yeah.
which is harrowing but really amazing, and Hampton Hawes and Notes and Tones, which is a bunch of interviews.
Yeah.
And like it's so great just to sort of get in touch with that older tradition of not a teacher student sort of relationship, but an older musician and an apprentice, more of an
Right.
older musician apprentice,
Mm.
and I'm sure it was really abused and horrible, and people quit when they shouldn't have, and older musicians used their power to do all sorts of horrible things, but
Mm.
um, it's interesting, it's interesting the way. Because I found that way, I found learning off older musicians to be really, really helpful, even if they weren't trying to be helpful,
Huh.
even if they were, because I don't, well, yeah, I think people used to tell you off a lot more than they do these days.
Yeah.
And people wanted a certain thing. No, I want it to be like this. I want it to be like this. And now it's like,
Right.
yeah, man,
Yeah, but then they don't
They,
tell you, so that's the half,
they don't call you. You just don't get called again. They go, yeah, man, that was awesome. Never seen
Yeah.
it.
But in
Whereas,
a way, it doesn't let you learn either. So that the negative
yeah,
of that is that you're not going to learn. They're not going to allow you to make that mistake and then fix it. It's
yeah.
almost like you have to do it or you're out. Mm.
Maybe there's just more good musicians now, so that you just go, I'll just try someone else. I'm not really into that. I'll try someone else.
Yeah.
Whereas maybe when there were fewer musicians, they go like, well, okay, I've got to get this guy again for next Saturday because there's no one else who can do it.
Yeah.
And so they go, okay, don't do that again. Don't do that again. I hate it when you do that.
Well, honestly, that's direct though, isn't it? Like, is that not communication? It's not very
I'm
nice,
into it.
but
Yeah. Yeah,
yeah.
no, I'm into it. And um, I remember hearing stories of, because I was never really around to do it, but when uh, American older musicians used to come through Australia and just pick up rhythm sections in different cities and do
Mm.
gigs.
Mm.
The way, Johnny Griffin came to Australia, and I was talking to, I think, Jeff Clute, the guy who played bass in it, and Johnny Griffin just explicitly said what he wanted.
Mm.
Because he doesn't really, um, he's not in it he's not in it to, yeah, man, let's, do your thing, man. He's like, bass player, don't play the cello, play the bass, meaning play down low, And piano player, don't play dominant six chords on turnaround. You know, like really specific things.
Ah,
And everyone in the band appreciated it. They went like, okay, cool. So, because I probably would have done a few of those things just to try it out, just to see what it's going to be like. But it's kind of better when you know what someone wants.